Hello and welcome to the Tristan channel, and today I'll be talking about the history of male witches. Male witches, you say? Why yes, indeed, there were and are male witches. Now you may be thinking, is a male witch not called a warlock? Well yes, they can be, but warlock is used as an expression more in the modern era than, say, during the time of witch hunts. The legend of the witch looms large in our cultural subconscious. They permeate our folklore and fairy tales, eating children and cursing the good. They haunt our horror films, cackling and cooing over cauldrons and flying on their brooms to the Sabbath. She can be a good witch, known as a white witch, or black witch, which is an evil witch. She is archetypal. She is a she, from the weird sisters of Macbeth to the grand high witch of Roald Dahl and the world of Harry Potter. The gendering of witches seems to be absolute. Witches are popularly seen as women. Except, ironically, when they're not, of course. You see, the male witch has a very long and unappreciated history indeed. Fantasy is one thing, but the mythology of the witch can also spill over into what we think of as historical fact. So entrenched is the belief that witches are women that radical feminist Mary Daly once called the witch hunts that swept across early modern Europe as women's Holocaust. But the history of the witch trials is far more complex. Not only were many thousands of men tried and executed as witches, but in countries like Normandy, Estonia, Burgundy, Russia and Iceland, more men than women were prosecuted for witchcraft. Even in the Malleus Maleficarum acknowledged the existence of male witches, although Kramer and Springer believed a greater number of witches is found in the fragile feminine sex than among men. They still devote an entire section of 3 types of witchcraft practiced by men, the most important of which was magical archery, which was said to be shooting at crucifixes and that sort of thing. Pardon me. Here are some from the mentioned countries above. Iceland. Between 1625 and 1685, 92% of convicted witchcraft were men, the most infamous trial being that of a father and son named John Johansson in 1655, known as the Kirkjubel witch trial. According to the legend, when the Reverend John Magnusson began waking in the night to the sensation of cats and mice crawling over his feet, of a dog with red-hot claws pinning his body to the bed, he had no doubt that he had been bewitched. Magnusson was certain he knew who was behind his torment when his night terrors began. The older John Johnson, while drunk, had admitted he had sent a spirit to taunt the Reverend. Magnusson became convinced that the father and son were cursing him because a few weeks earlier he had been forced to reprimand the younger Johnson for punching a woman in church. This was all the evidence Magnusson needed that the Johnsons were out to get him, and he took his case to the sheriff in Sudovik. Magnusson claimed that John Johnsons were possessed by the devil and called upon various members of his family to testify to his suffering. The father and son were ordered to publicly swear an oath to God that they had never colluded with the devil, and that they would renounce any further acts of witchcraft. To begin with, everyone was satisfied with the ruling, but when the Magnusson's night terrors continued, the John Johnsons were brought back to trial, and able to produce enough witnesses to testify their innocence. The Johnsons were thrown in jail, and after 7 months they were willing to confess their crimes. Not only did they confess to tormenting Magnusson but in his sleep, but also to keeping a book of spells, killing cattle, poisoning beer, and creating flatulent curse creating flatulent curses that causes its victims to fart uncontrollably. Sounds fun. For their crimes, both men were burned at the stake on April 10th, 1656. Between 1625 and 1683, approximately 130 people were brought before the courts. Of that, 130 were 21 were executed. 20 were men and 1 woman. Russia. In Russia, 75% of accused witches were men. Normandy. During 1564 and 1660, over 70% of the 380 known witchcraft defendants in Rouen, Normandy, were men. What's interesting is in Normandy, the witch isn't some old woman but a shepherd. How bizarre. In fact, nearly half the men accused of witchcraft in the Pays de Chaux region in Normandy, I butchered that name, were shepherds. As late as 1703, Normandy Parliament sentenced 3 shepherds to be burnt to death for having broken down a church door at night and carried off some hosts from the tabernacle as well as holy water from the baptismal font. Why shepherds? No one is quite sure, but it is thought that their association with wolves that hunt their flocks and the long nights spent out in the wilds had something to do with it. Also interesting is that priests were convicted too, around 10% in Normandy in the 17th century. In the UK, 80% of the convicted witches were women, but in 1645 we too convicted a priest, one who was 80 years old, by the name of John Lowes of Bradston. A very unpopular man, this wasn't the first time Lowes had fallen victim to his neighbour's anger, but it was the first time he had come under the authority of the Witchfinder General Matthew Hopkins. In just 2 short years, Hopkins is believed to have overseen the arrest and execution of 300 people on the charges of witchcraft. He was rewarded handsomely for every witch he uncovered. Although torture was illegal, Hopkins was prepared to break the law to secure a confession. Records tell us that Hopkins kept John Lowes awake several nights together while running him about his cell until out of breath, until he lost all will. However, was unable to make him confess. He took Lowes to Framlingham Castle to be dunked in the moat. It was believed that water would reject a witch as unclean, so they would float. If the victims sank, they were innocent and quite probably dead. Chairman's newt. How many times Lowes was dunked into the water is not known, but it was this that broke him, and he confessed to having made a pact with the devil, to sinking ships, and to many other wicked deeds. Lowes was one of the 18 people who were executed for witchcraft at Bury St Edmund on the exact same day. It's also interesting due to a patriarchal society. If you're a wealthy male witch, you could get away with not being accused due to wealth and standing, meaning the courts or witchfinders could be bought off. John Napier of Merchiston, for example, is believed to be a witch who dabbled with the occult, yet was protected by his status. However, witches today, except in certain places like the Bible Belt in America, see witches differently today. They are associated with neo-pagan religions such as Wicca, founded by the witch father Gerald Gardner, which is used in a non-binary sense like it was used in the witch hunts of old. Example, you have both male and female witches, although you may have the few who love to use the term wizard or warlock. So, there you have it. If you like this video, hit the like, and if you haven't, then please show support by subscribing to my channel and hit that bell notification so you don't miss out on any new videos or uploads in the future. Until next time, take care and be well.